In the program now, I have on the line Sarah Yeates, the Chief Executive Officer of Caladenia's Dementia Care. Welcome to the program again, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Brian. It's lovely to be here again.
Well, it's a little while since I had a chat to you.
It has been.
Now, the Caladenia's going from strength to strength, I believe.
Caladenia certainly is. Our programs have grown to over 12 programs a week, social programs for people living with dementia. We've increased our volunteer base, we've increased our staffing numbers, and of course the opportunities for respite for people living with dementia.
Sarah, Caladenia is a day respite centre, isn't it?
Yes, Brian, it is. It has many names. It's a day respite, but it's also social support programs. So we provide programs for people with any diagnosis of dementia, right from very early stage, people who are using it as peer support, doing social programs, chatting to each other. Those people are still maybe driving, managing really well at home. And then we also provide programs for people with quite advanced dementia, where their family member and their carer might need a break from caring for them, so we will care for them for the day.
With the programs that you run, you also have special club days.
That's right. When we were started by a lady named Trish Maggs back in the early 1980s, and she didn't want Caladenia to be known as an aged care service. So she called us the club. We always invite people to come up and see the club. We've got a lovely venue up here on top of the hill in Mooroolbark. And we don't talk about dementia. We don't talk about respite to the person living with dementia. We invite them to the club. And we have drop-in days from time to time where family members can come and see the programs, see the club rooms, enjoy the views and join in with activities. And we call our social programs our club days.
And of course, all these are supported by a very strong volunteer base.
Brian, we could not do what we do without our volunteers. We have over 50 volunteers. Some of them have been with us over 30 years. Volunteers volunteer in the program, assisting with activities, chatting to our club members, our people with dementia, including them in all the conversations and activities. We've also got volunteers that go out on our outing-based programs. So we've got some men volunteers who go out on the men's program. We've got other volunteers who volunteer up at our program at Yarra Glen. But we also have volunteers behind the scenes. One of our volunteers, Les, has been volunteering for nearly 20 years, doing our database for us for nothing. We have ladies who volunteer in the garden, weeding and planting annuals and looking after the flowers. We also are administered by a volunteer board of directors, so all the work that they do is volunteer work as well.
What would we do without volunteers?
We couldn't function. We could not function without volunteers. I did a bit of a costing this year to talk about at our annual general meeting, and we would have to add almost another $500,000 a year if we had to pay our volunteers for what they do.
With the club, you have from time to time some very impressive speakers. And I think just recently you had Senior Constable Linda Hancock with you.
That's right. Because we're supporting the family members and carers as well, we have carer support groups. And Linda actually came to us this morning to speak to our carers, our family carers, about staying safe online. So she had to talk to us about staying away from scams, whether it be on the telephone, through the front door, or through the computer or mobile phone. Very interesting.
The activities that you have, do you find that the men that you have with you cooperate as readily, or do you have to really convince them that you can help them?
Oh, look, each person's different, Brian. We do have some men who perhaps aren't as keen to come along to just a social day. We do have some men-specific groups that run through the week, and they go and do very manly things like 10-pin bowling and woodwork exhibitions and have a pub lunch supported by a male volunteer. But we also found that our male carers weren't taking us up on utilising the support of our support groups. So this year we've actually started a men's carer lunch. Men who are caring for usually partners living with dementia get together once a month to share practical tips that they've learnt with each other and give each other a bit of support in their caring role.
And of course, with dementia, as we all know, people who are in the process of, it's an infliction really, they go through certain stages as they're progressing on with their illness, and they become, you've got the happy parts, and then there's the real
people
anger.
Yes, that can happen, Brian. People progress through very different stages, and everybody's journey with dementia is different. I know of a young person who was diagnosed in their 30s who went through all the stages and actually passed away after only 4 or 5 years. And I know of other people who have lived with dementia, slowly progressing for 15 to 20 years. It's a disease that's very different for everyone. I know that there's a lot of, I'm going to say stigma, but a bit of bad press about some of the frustration and the behaviours that sometimes accompany the symptoms of dementia, but that's certainly not the norm. And when people are accessing services, quality services that understand their needs, we see very little or none of any of those behaviours which get such bad press.
Now, how can people access your facility?
Well, for people over 65, they need to have an assessment through My Aged Care, which is the process now that qualifies older people for any government-funded service. And for people under 65, they just have to give me a phone call. We take people who are on NDIS packages. We take people who are not on NDIS packages. And we will also take people on home care packages. So your best bet is to give me a call, shoot me an email, and I will sort out what's best for your individual circumstances.
Now, Sarah, all this sounds very, very good. And the work that you're doing has been acknowledged by many as most important. But probably the most important part of your administration is funding. How do you go about that?
So, Brian, we're funded by the Commonwealth Government under the Community Home Support Service, and that covers our basic programs. We get a little bit of money from the state for people under 65, so we're still funded by the state government. We're supported by the Shire of Yarra Rangers, who we've been in partnership with, and we have a partnership grant agreement with, and they have very generously funded our work with carers over the last 2 or 3 years. But for anything that's out of the ordinary, we need to fundraise for that. We take donations at any time of year. We're a not-for-profit, which means all donations are tax-deductible, and we're grateful for every cent that comes in either over the phone or through the door.
Now, I also hear on the grapevine that the community bank in Mooroolbark is very, very caring and very generous towards you.
The community branch bank at Mooroolbark has been absolutely fantastic. Over the last 5 or 10 years, they granted us $50,000 for a new bus, which is just amazing. 2 years ago, they granted us an amount of money to replace our really shabby carpets. And just this week, I attended their AGM where I was presented with a cheque for $5,000 to take down our ratty lace curtains and put up some nice sheer window coverings. Our partnership with the Mooroolbark branch of the Bendigo Bank is so appreciated. We feel so grateful towards them.
Well, there's no doubt about it. They are what they say they are, a community bank, and they support the community in so many different ways. And your organisation is just one of a long list of organisations that are supported by Mirralbark Community Bank.
We certainly are. We're very grateful.
Sarah, it's wonderful to be able to talk to you again, and one of these days I will get back out there to see you.
That'd be great.
It's to find the time, that's the problem.
Yep.
But we certainly wish you well, and we hope that you continue the good work and also support the people who need you most, and that's people who are in the process of either running into dementia or have dementia.
Yes.
You do such great work up there, and we say thank you to all your volunteers, because without them you just would not function.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian.
My guest in the program has been Sarah Yeates, and Sarah is the Chief Executive Officer of the Caladenia Dementia Care, and they're in Mirralbark, and they do such wonderful work. Thanks very much, Sarah.